What did you lose in your life because of the positions you took? Were there things that you...
I've never looked at it that way. I've
Really?
looked at what I've gained in my life from the positions I took.
So it was never something of, gee, I wish.
I don't think so. Maybe it's because I didn't wish for the same things that a lot of people wish for. But I know that the meaning, I mean, just why do I appreciate Pete Seeger? Somehow or other it was clear to me that in his life, it was not the typical things of the entertainment world for which he strove and which made him happy. Plus, I don't think they generally make people very happy. For me, it was always the involvement with other people, particularly people who were suffering or hurting and didn't have a voice of their own. And when I was able to do something for, with, on behalf of them, it always brought a richness to my life.
Were you surprised that basically socialism has failed around the world?
I think we're all failing rather nicely around the world. I mean, it's not just one part of the world that's erupting at the moment. We certainly are erupting here.
What's the biggest thing we face in this? What's the biggest problem we face here?
Probably our own oblivion.
You think we're headed toward it? You're pessimistic about this country.
Well, you know, I've never been an optimist. It's assumed that, you know, liberals, pacifists, optimists are all now.
No, that's true. We always assumed liberals were negative because they always seemed extremely worried about whether it was snail darters or ozone holes, or they were always depressed about something.
Yeah.
And we were like, hey, man, we'd like to make a buck. And so the campus kids that were liberals were all saying, you know, we've got to worry about the bark on this tree. And we were all saying, we'd like to make a buck.
Right.
So there was this crazy thing.
And which one do you think makes more sense?
Well, if you're right and the world's going to be over soon, I guess make a few bucks and have a good, make a few bucks and have a good time, and you know, plant a few trees along the way. I don't know.
That's funny.
Well, let's go back to Martin Luther King and Gandhi. They were both known as big-time womanizers. Should that affect their place in history in any way?
I suspect that if you took anybody you admired and you looked with either with a large microscope or small or just directly into their lives, you would find things that were really unsavory at one time or another in their lives.
Does this mean they don't have character, they lack character, or they're just human?
I think that it means that they're just human, plus that they took on a role that was superhuman. And for anybody in that position, it's almost impossible to maintain any kind of daily equilibrium. And it was their way, apparently, of dealing with it was unsavory in that aspect.
Weren't you criticized once for a poster or something that said you can make out with the girls who say no to the guys who say no to the war or something?
The poster, which I thought was just very clever because I was oblivious to the women's liberation movement. I was absolutely oblivious. I had just gotten married and I wanted to put on a little apron, get pregnant, run around the house and dust things. And we made a poster of my two sisters and myself sitting with hats on saying, girls say yes to men who say no.
To the war. We have to take a break. Girls say yes to men who say no. We'll be right back with Joan Baez. Stay with us.
It's blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Who is that? That's Judy Collins and...
The first voice was my sister Mimi, and the second was Judy's, and then I joined them, but we didn't get that far. That's one of the songs I know.
We're talking about these CDs. You may want to get them. I'm going to go out and get one, actually, because I know that these have already been stolen by my staff. I bet you. I guarantee you. Watch. Here, come back here. Show this. See, I knew this. See, they give me the empty box because the staff has already stolen the CDs.
I'll give you
Joan
one,
Baez.
and I'll sign it.
Oh.
To one of those clever, intelligent conservatives.
One of the few. Okay, we're going to take another phone call from Richard in West Virginia. You're on the line with Joan Baez.
Hi, Joan Baez.
Howdy.
What I wanted to ask you, I heard you and Roger talking about, well, he was saying, you know, talking about you being the president, but you didn't want to be president. So just something that interests me. If you were to be president, which you don't want to be, would you give aid? Would you change the policy that we have about giving aid to other countries and just try to revitalize this country? We have enough problems over here. Would you change the policy?
I think the question is, would you? Because you got your mind made up already. And if I've already resigned as president, we're probably going to have to ask somebody
There's a real
else.
void here. You don't want it, and she doesn't want it. All right, the answer is foreign aid is useful at times.
That's Roger's answer.
That is right. I have my own philosophy on that is very simple. Everything should have value. And if you help someone, there should be some value in that. I don't know what you went to Sarajevo, right?
For whom?
For anybody, but somebody has to get help. If you just give it to a government who steals it and never gets to the people, you have a problem. We have a history of giving it to governments that steal it and it never gets to the people we're trying to help. When were you in Sarajevo?
I was there a year and a half ago.
They were shooting at that time, weren't they?
They were shooting, yeah.
You've got to stay out of the war zones. For somebody who likes war as little as you do, you were in Vietnam when they were bombing. You were there when they were shooting. What did you see over there?
Oh, it's such an emotional impact that I kind of don't even feel it. In fact, the only time I cried was when I looked out the hotel room window and saw all the trees that would have been in front of my window cut to the ground for firewood. There were no trees left in Sarajevo, or there were very few, I think 10% left. So I just saw human terrible heartache and suffering and courage. Everything I had read about the people was true. I mean,
I'm torn on that issue of Bosnia as to whether we should try to help militarily or just with human aid. Do you have a position on that?
So far, I mean, even if I were a clever military person, which I'm not, it does not seem like the ideal place to try and help militarily. That doesn't get us off the hook as far as our tendencies, just like just about anywhere else in the world, of concentrating so on the military that we really are inept when it comes to diplomacy and to any other ways of dealing with conflict resolution, conflict solving. And when I went to Sarajevo, it wasn't because I had the faintest idea politically of answers. I didn't and I don't. But I was fortunate enough to have a way to make a bridge to people, to show them, you know, and to remind them that there were people out here who cared about them, and it apparently was very meaningful to them, almost as meaningful as it was to me, maybe. You know.
What has all this meant to your life? When you look back, the work you've done and what you've accomplished, you're a brilliant performer, you've taken positions that are not popular, or during times when they were not popular. You stuck to them, which I admire. I don't always agree with you, but I will say you have been extremely consistent throughout your entire life. What has it done for you? What do you think you've contributed, and what have you gained from this life?
Well, those are two different questions.
I know.
And what I've contributed, there really isn't too much of a way for me to tell, except when people come and say something to me, which is always very moving to me, that I meant something in their lives. And now in this sort of legendary status, that they get a little teary when they come up on the street because I'm history. I'm walking history. It reminds them of their...
Does it bother you at all, being walking history?
No. The only problem with being walking history is trying to also be current in the entertainment world, which is extremely difficult to do. I mean, if I did the best album of my career tomorrow, it's a big so what, unless there's some kind of flashy way to market it. Because partly...
You're never going to do a rap album, I can tell. I know this is not your thing.
This is probably true.
You know? I don't know. There are certain artists that are timeless, and there are popular artists. Tony Bennett, for instance, is back. I mean, there are people who've done that, and you've always been there. I mean, there was a time in the 80s when you seemed to go away for a couple of years. I don't know whether you were home writing or what you were doing, but you always come back. I mean, that's always been the feeling.
As long as the chords are stretching in there, I will.
You're still singing well?
Yes.
Yeah? Do you wish you had done something in your life that you didn't do?
I think we sort of touched on that earlier. They're just the personal things. You know, I wish I had been there at a certain time, but they're small things. They're not... I mean, there's been no sort of major shift in my politics. There's been no major shift in that foundation of really having fallen in love with Gandhi's teachings when I was early, and then hearing Martin Luther King speak when I was 15, and this man was doing with his people what I knew in theory, but you know, it was my first contact with somebody who was on the streets of Montgomery walking to freedom. Those things are so solid in me.
What are the best and worst things about capitalism?
I suppose the worst would be greed, and the best would be what you and I are
We
privy
live pretty
to.
well.
We live very well, yeah.
Do you think that America is getting more generous of spirit or meaner of spirit?
Well, I don't know. It always makes me nervous when people talk about how generous they are,
Yeah.
you know. So I think that I think it really is
But as
something.
a country, are we getting more concerned? I saw there have been a couple magazine articles recently about people reaching for spiritualism or religion or trying to find meaning in their lives. Do you think that's true?
Well, that's a little scary too when you hear about the new churches and the crystal palaces and what religions may mean to people, what spirituality may mean to people, because we've become in some ways tremendously superficial. So that there's a kind of a Hollywood mentality that when I sort of heard the first commentary on those churches gave me the willies. I mean, you really go and you sit in a theater and you watch a production. And I'm not sure that that's what spirituality maybe.
You don't think Jesus had in mind a Broadway show?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Is that going to really motivate these people towards kindness and compassion?
Are you religious?
You know, until I heard Terry Anderson speak a couple of weeks ago, he's a friend of mine, I would have said, no, I'm spiritual. And then he said, I'm not afraid to say I'm religious. I don't belong to a church, but I am extremely spiritual, and so probably that means I'm religious.
But you believe in God, sort of,
Yeah.
in a way. Did you raise your son that way?
I think so,
Yeah.
inadvertently maybe. I was so busy making sure that I didn't encumber him with too many of my beliefs that I don't think I gave him enough. But he's finding that in his own way, and now he and I can talk about any of it. So yes, I think he believes in a God.
Joan will be performing tomorrow night at a benefit for the Children's Health Fund with Paul Simon here in New York. And you can get this this box of CDs. You guys return those in the control room now, because I'm going to ask her to sign this for me, because I'm a big fan of hers. Joan, would you come back some night?
Yeah, thank
Do
you
it
very
again?
much. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Great performance.